If you want to go straight into the tutorial, just fast forward to this point in time. Hi, I'm Espen Kraft, and I've been using synthesizers since the mid-80s. I learned to use them from books, it was all we had back then. But now, in the age of the internet, we can watch tutorials online, just like you're doing right now. This video is for you that knows nothing about synthesizers, but you've heard of them, you've seen them, and you want to know how they work. A synthesizer is a machine that electronically generates and modifies sounds. And without them, the music made for the last 60 years or so wouldn't exist. Synthesizers come in all forms, shapes and sizes. They can cost anything from $10 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can get one that looks like an electric piano, or it can be software on your computer, or it can be an app on your phone. They can be very simple, and they can be incredibly advanced, and anything in between. The good thing is that they operate pretty much the same way. If you know the basics, you can pretty much master any synthesizer. The same with cars. If you know how to drive, you can drive any car. The models might look different, but they're still cars. The same goes for synths. Well, I'm pretty sure you're eager to dive in right now, so let's do it. And this is the synthesizer we're going to use today. This is a Roland Juno-106 from the mid-1980s. It was considered a beginner's synth back in the day. It's very simple, so it will work very well for us for learning how a synthesizer operates. Okay, let's start with the oscillator section. Here is where you pick out the pitch and the overall timbre of the sound. And in a synthesizer, a timbre is made out of waveforms or one single waveform. And different waveforms will sound differently. A saw wave will sound very bright, and a pulse wave will sound like a computer. A sine wave will sound mellow. And in this particular synthesizer, I have two waveforms to choose from. I have a saw wave, or I have a pulse wave, and I can choose both at the same time as well, blend those together. But let's go for the saw wave first. And let's also pick out a pitch for this sound. And 4, 8 or 16 foot. This is in reference to these old church organs from many hundreds of years ago. So the higher the number, the lower the pitch of the sound will be. So the lower the number, the higher the pitch. So let's set it at 8 foot first, and let's press a key. So let's find a middle point here, 8. And now I can play chords. So this is a pulse. A little bit different in timbre. Both combined. And this synth also has a noise waveform. This is not on a button, this is on a fader, because you can blend that in. Let's try that as well. And let's turn off the saw. And this sounds the same over the entire keyboard, because this is just noise. And we can use that to make thunder effects or rain effects or wind effects, etc. I'll show you that a little bit later. Let's turn this off for now, and let's go back to that saw wave. Now we're going to shape this sound. Let's go over to the filter. And the filter, that is your tone control. Think of your old hi-fi system, the equalizer. With the filter, you can set the brightness of the sound. And this is usually done with an adjustment fader called either frequency or cutoff. Different synth manufacturers use different names for this. So with the frequency fader here, I can set the brightness of the tone. Let's try it. With the settings all down low, I won't hear anything because the tone control has made the sound go out of range for my ears, so I can't hear anything. It's too low. but raised up high, I can hear it perfectly. It's very bright at its brightest. Another adjustment you also have on synthesizers next to the frequency or cutoff fader is the resonance fader. And with the resonance adjustment, I will boost the frequencies around the point of where I've set the frequency knob here, the cutoff knob. So let's try and set this almost side by side here, and let's hear the sound now. It sounds quite different, more nasal if you want. And it lacks a little bit more bass. So with the resonance, you have some interesting possibilities by setting the resonance high and the frequency low. You can drastically change the timbre. Again, we've set the pitch and the overall timbre in the oscillator section. The sound travels over to the filter section where we've shaped the sound a little bit. And now it moves over to the amplifier section, and we have just one fader here. And what does it do? Let's find out. Okay, it basically acts as a total volume control, and that's pretty much what it is. However, most synths have a section called the envelope next to the amplifier, and with the envelope you can shape how the sound will come at you, how fast or how slow. Let's demonstrate. You usually have 4 different settings in the envelope. A fader called attack, decay, sustain and release. So with everyone down, you hear only a click. With the sustain way up, the sound will never die out because it's being sustained. With the attack way at 0, the sound comes at you immediately. By raising this attack fader, you can make the sound come at you at a much slower rate. Let's put it up to 5 here. 10. Way slower. The decay setting determines how fast the sound will die off after you've passed the initial attack. Let's try it. It doesn't make any change. It's the same, and that's because the sustain fader is way up. With this way up, the sound will always be sustained. So let's try and put this way down and raise the decay now. Aha! So with the decay knob, the sound will swiftly die off. So you can mimic more of a piano or harpsichord. So let's play with this a little bit. So by playing with these faders, you can mimic different types of instruments, like a violin, for instance, will have a longer decay and maybe a more sustained tone. And when you take the bow off the strings, it will stop immediately. But with a piano sound, with a short attack, it shouldn't die off immediately. It should have some kind of release time. And that's the 4th fader here, the release. Let's put this way up. Ah. So you see, by using the envelope, we can shape the sound and how it moves in time from where you press the key. So the envelope is necessary to shape the sound in that way. So let's go back to where we had it at the beginning with just a sustained note. So we've gone through the oscillator, the filter, the amplifier, and the envelope. And the last thing we'll take a look at is the LFO. What is that? Well, the LFO is another way of shaping the sound or modulating the sound. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, so it is an oscillator as well. It just has a pitch that is so low that we can't hear it with our naked ear. But the sound we've made here will be changed by the settings of these parameters here. Let's demonstrate that as well. And pay attention to the oscillator section. It has a fader called LFO. Pay attention to the filter section. It has a fader called LFO. And these two faders will be directly linked to what's happening here. Let's hear our sound again. As you can hear, nothing changes with the sound. It's kind of static and boring if you like. Let's go over to the oscillator section and press or move the fader here called LFO, and let's hear the sound. Something's happening with the pitch here. It's drifting. And this is exactly what will happen when we engage an LFO into the oscillator section. It will start messing with the pitch. And to use this in a musical way, we're going to use it a little bit more subtle. So let's put this up on around 4 here, and let's play with the rate here. You hear that? It starts to vibrate like a vibrato on a singer. And by using the delay time here, let's put this way up to 5. We can delay when the LFO starts to affect the oscillator. Just like a singer, by holding the note a little bit and then engaging the vibrato, it sounds more human, more emotional. And this is how the LFO can influence the pitch and the oscillator. Very interesting and very cool. So let's turn that off. And now it won't affect the oscillators at all. But let's see if it can affect the filter section. Let's turn this up. Aha, it moves the filter up and down. So by using the LFO to affect the filter, we can get some cool effects going that way. And let's turn on the oscillators again. Let the LFO affect the oscillators. So by adjusting how much the LFO will affect the oscillator or the filter, we can create movement in the sound and make the sound more organic or more interesting or whatever we want it to be. So that's how we use an LFO. So let's turn off the saw wave here and let's go for that noise. Let's try and shape that a little bit with the LFO for the filter. So by playing with the frequency and the resonance fader of the filter and engaging the LFO to be affected by the rate, we can make wind sounds. And by giving this a little bit of release as well. Playing with the attack time. Let's turn off the saw wave and let's check out the pulse wave. Sounds a little bit different. And these can be shaped, of course, in the same way as before. This particular synth has something that we will recognize on other synths as well, called PWM. That stands for pulse width modulation. And with that, you can make a little bit of movement into the oscillator itself by turning this fader. Let's check it out. So this has a little bit of change, modulation built into the oscillator itself. It would be cooler if we could use the actual LFO to modulate or change the modulation itself. Or all we have to do is to turn this knob here from manual, because we've changed this manually, over to LFO. And now we will use the LFO to actually make this fader go up and down. Not physically, but sound-wise. So by turning this up a little bit, we get another type of movement into the oscillator itself. So a pulse wave modulated can often be a great way of making string sounds or pad sounds on a synth. Let's blend in the saw wave as well and hear what's happening. And the last thing we have in the oscillator section, which we haven't looked at, is the so-called sub-oscillator, and all that does is blend in another oscillator below everything else, an octave below, to make the sound even more bassier and beefier. Let's check it out. This is just the sub-oscillator. It is also affected by the envelope and things like that. So by blending this into taste, we can make a really nice fat bass sound. And as I started, every synthesizer will have these building blocks inside it. Oscillators, filters, amplifiers, envelopes, LFOs. And if you know what these parts are doing, you will be able to master any synth, even if it's more complicated and have more adjustments. Just play around and have fun, and you'll soon be a synth master. Well, now we've talked about and tried out some of the basic functionality of a synthesizer. And as we experienced, by shaping a basic waveform, we can make a synthesizer sound pretty much anything we like. And this is really all there's to it. You can make even more complex sounds if you start to mix in several different basic waveforms at once, shaping them in real time. And that's where the real fun begins. If you are interested in a video sequel to this one, please leave a comment in the comment section saying so. I hope you had a good time watching this video. Please click like if you did. I'm Espen Kraft and I look forward to seeing you again. Cheers!